Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth episode of The Hand Does the Talking with our special guest, Jess McKay. Today, we're going to be talking about his story and his experiences in puppetry. We're very excited to have him as our guest, our second guest, and we're hoping to have a really fun conversation with him today and get to share his story with you guys. I am joined with my co-host, TJ Schubert.
What's up, everybody?
And our special guest, Jess.
Hey, guys.
So typically on the show, we like to talk about our story. That's how we started. And then we talk about our guests. But everyone kind of has had a chance to hear the story of myself and TJ. And if they haven't, that's a great thing to go listen to in our first episode. But Jess, the first thing I'd like to ask is how did you get started in puppetry?
Well, I started in puppetry kind of in a very cool place. One of my first experiences with puppetry was at the O'Neill Puppetry Conference. I grew up in Massachusetts, and during high school, I was doing theater a lot. And just from being in that world, I had the opportunity to go down and at the time, they had a system where the emerging artists at the O'Neill would have a bunch of just puppeteers, local people who were there to help them bring their projects to life. And I was lucky enough to be one of those like local people when I was, how old? I think I was 18 or 17 when I did my first one. And it was just a week, but I'm working with some of the, top people in the industry for puppetry. So it was at a very kind of formative age for me, a really cool environment to be in. My first year, I worked with a guy named Paul McGinnis, who's a wonderful puppeteer who I actually still work with today on projects. Yeah, I started at the O'Neill, and if you haven't had a chance to go to a big puppetry conference like that, I know with COVID right now, it's tough to get out there. They're doing virtual conferences online. And as much as you can absorb and just be exposed to all different styles of puppetry and yeah, I would recommend going to a conference if you're into puppetry and you've never been to one, go check it out, whether it's as an audience member or as a participant, however you can.
That's very cool. That's what I would consider like a traditional upbringing into the performance area of puppetry. That seems more natural to me than other ways of coming into it. Like TJ and myself, who kind of came into it in a working environment where we had to build a puppet. Your way of coming in is very cool.
Yeah, I think, well, if I can for a second, all puppetry is such a cool thing because it's something that even in societies and cultures where there's no, let me rephrase that. Every society and culture has a tradition of puppetry in some sense. I think that it's something that's kind of just built into humans. So whether we come at puppetry from being like, oh, I want to do this for this one specific project, and then we fall in love with it from doing the work of puppetry, or whether we're introduced to it as more of an art form and something that we can work on, and you don't have the pressure of making something to sell at the beginning, or just if you're storytelling, children do puppetry with their, toys with each other. That's a form of any storytelling that you do through an object. I think it falls under the umbrella of puppetry somehow. So yeah, it's really exciting, that I don't think it's going to go away. It's something that's just a part of us as people.
Yeah, and it does seem like a very natural thing for people to pick up and become like in love with doing. So yeah, it's just really cool to hear that you got it in that way and just getting to experience it with other people as well. Do you build your own puppets? Did you start that early on, or was that something that you kind of did later on?
So I started pretty early on building my own puppets, but then I stopped for a while. I built some puppets when I was like 18, 19 years old, and then I didn't pick it up again until maybe 8 years later when I built my first hand and rod style puppet. My earlier puppets that I built were sort of bunraku, sort of really skeletal structure, tabletop type puppets. And then later on, I got involved with Puppet Up, but I didn't have any experience at that point with monitor puppetry. All my stuff had been live theater puppetry, and so I needed a practice puppet. I needed a really good practice puppet, but I was looking for someone to build me a puppet, and at that point, it was way too expensive for me to get a good practice puppet. So I said, I'll just make one myself. And I started from there, and I really fell in love with building puppets. And it's been something that's been great for me as a puppeteer as well, because oftentimes when you build a puppet, you're among one of the first people to hear about this project, and it's so much fun, as I'm sure you guys know, as builder puppeteers, to be able to make something and then bring life to that thing it's a really, there are some builders who are just builders. There are some puppeteers who are just puppeteers, and there's nothing against either of those things. Both of those are great, but I love being a builder puppeteer, just from the beginning of the process all the way through to breathing life into this character.
Right. There really isn't a wrong way to be a part of the puppet community. But yeah, it is more of a special connection, in my opinion, when you do build your own puppet and you're with it that whole process. But I also love to build and sell, so I understand the opposite of that argument as well. You do a lot of singing and music. Is that based on something you did in school, like choir or something, or was that just something you picked up?
Exactly. So when I was in high school and even middle school, I was a part of choir. It was so much fun for me. And my high school in particular, it took music pretty seriously. I'm from a town called Longmeadow, Massachusetts, and Longmeadow High School, the year before I went there, it won like a Grammy for its music program or something. And so they took it really, really seriously. So we were doing like serious choir music and a cappella stuff. And that was my favorite, and I was doing that. And at the same time, they had a program called Music Lab, which was it was like a room full of keyboards, like old 80s and 90s synthesizers that were attached to Mac computers that were running MIDI sequencing software. So it was it was a MIDI lab. It was a MIDI recording studio, essentially. So I got so much experience in music in high school. I feel like I had the equivalent of like a university education. Maybe probably not. They get into deeper stuff, but it was something that was a part of my very early life. And then I wrote some digital music in my early 20s that I ended up being able to option and sell. So that was something that I got some. I think encouragement is really helpful early on in someone's career. And if for example, you try to be a skateboarder and you get out there and on your first day, you have some success, like whether that's standing on the board and going, or being able to do an ollie, whatever that is, if you can get a little bit of positive reinforcement at the very beginning of whatever you're doing, that can really help to blossom within you. So I don't know. It's something that I'm really grateful for, was having that. Back to your question, the musical background, and also the encouragement and the someone there to say to me, "Hey, this is something you can do. This is something that you are capable of doing. If you want to do this, you can do this." And that was a really special moment for me in high school.
That's awesome. I loved your music videos so much with Little Witchy. I love Little Witchy so much. I really look up to, Spike really looks up to Little Witchy, and I looked up to you so much. You are so talented, and all your puppets are so different. Your style is so different. And I was just wondering, how do you come up with your characters in the designs you do?
Well, thanks, TJ. That's really nice. So it's really important to me to make things that don't look like things that have already been made. And the reason for that is, man, I guess I can't even say. Sometimes I like to make a puppet that looks like just a traditional puppet, but right now, specifically in my new puppet, I have this new project that I'm embarking on. That's really just a personal project, and I'm looking at it more like art instead of puppetry. And what it is I'm going to try to make, and I've already made a couple of them, a series of puppets that are puppets. They're made of foam and fleece, you know, when I say puppets, there's a million different types of puppets, but I primarily work with foam and fleece, hand and rod, Muppet style puppets. That's my world. That's what I enjoy doing the most. But I want to try to make a series of new puppets that don't look like anything that's ever been made before. And it's really kind of been inspired by what I would like to say, like the new generation of puppeteers that I see. There's some really interesting stuff happening with younger puppeteers who are just like picking up a blanket and a plunger, for example, and making a puppet out of that. Like, what's the vocabulary? What's the language of these puppets that we're using, and how can we expand that into something new? Because as much as I love the Muppets, Sesame Street, all that stuff is really great. It was really a product of its time in the 20th century, and it's going to continue. But what's the evolution of that? What's next? Who are our new characters? What are they going to look like? What's their visual vocabulary? What's their comedic vocabulary? Those are the things that are really exciting for me, because going back and doing what's already been done is fun and all, but I don't know. I get bored with that. I want something new. So yeah, that would be, I think, the driving force in my puppet design, is making something that looks new. Now, this is, of course, me talking about my own puppets. Oftentimes, what I make is a commission from another person, and of course, when someone else commissions a puppet from you, you're working based on their design, and if you get feedback and all that stuff. So yeah, this isn't every single puppet I build, but when I'm making, like, for example, I have a puppet called Rembrandt the Ant, and his eyes are sort of unique in puppets. They're these big, big black orbs that actually were these knobs that I found at IKEA that are meant for like dressers or something. But they're these big black shiny orbs. And when I built that, and he has 6 arms, or not 6, he has 4 arms. So there's 2 unique elements about that puppet. I'm sure there's other ant puppets that have 4 arms and black shiny eyes, but I try to, I could have gone with the white eyes with the black pupil and the eyelid with the classic Muppet style thing. And I'm not the only one that's doing new sort of styles, and every puppet builder has their own style. Even if you're trying to make something that looks exactly like the Muppets, unless you're a really good replica artist, some of your own personal style is going to get in there. I'm on a brief tangent right now, but something about puppet building that I learned was, so puppetry is an art. Puppets are a thing where you see the seams sometimes. You can see the stitches. You can, in a sense, that these objects are created. They're not real beings. Some people see them as that. Children will look at puppets sometimes and be like, is that real? Dogs, some people will look at that, and that's, its own thing. But as a new puppet builder, I was like, oh yeah, you can see the seams, no big deal, whatever, we see the seams. And I was using that as an excuse because I didn't know how to hide the seam. Now, with a lot more experience, I've learned kind of how to make puppets look more, traditionally pretty or whatever. But the point that I'm trying to make is sometimes we still see the seams, but I like to try to have that be a choice, rather than because I don't know how to make it look different. It's a choice that we're seeing the rough frayed edges on this puppet. Or if I want it to look totally clean, it can look totally clean. So if you are a puppet builder, I would recommend learning to do things in as many different ways as you can, and having a creative, open mind when you're looking to solve a problem. Oftentimes I see people using ping pong balls for eyes for puppets, and that's great. But personally, I feel like I've seen a million puppets with ping pong ball eyes and with, ostrich feather hair and all that stuff. And for me, I'm excited when I see puppets that are using a new visual vocabulary. So yeah, that was a really long question, but a really long answer to your question, but thanks for asking.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. That's why I try to do something different with my characters and my puppets. So it's great that you're here, and you're here to spread the message too. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I wanted to ask you guys a question. I really like the song, your theme song for this show. It's been stuck in my head. What is that music?
Oh, thank you. That's Ryan's music. Ryan is our producer and my best friend from high school. he makes lo-fi music and other types of music, but yeah, that's something he made a long time ago, and just put it into the podcast, and people have been really enjoying the music. So if that's something you like and other people like, he's got a Spotify, and if music people want to talk to him about his music, I'm sure that you could get in contact with him, talk more about it. But yeah, he made that music, and it's really good. It's really catchy.
What's his Spotify?
Rhino, Ryknow.
Ryknow. Okay, I'll check that out. Thank you.
No problem. Shameless plug. Yeah, it's honestly, having Ryan be a part of the show has been a huge blessing with his creative style. So I really do enjoy having him, and I'm sure he appreciates that you appreciate his music, for sure.
All right.
But one thing I wanted to ask was, other than the music that you do, what else? What other kind of mediums of puppetry have you maybe just dipped your toes in, or really worked on hardcore over your career's time?
So there's a few. One that's really exciting for me, and one that is sort of new is I've been working in virtual reality puppetry, where you take a VR headset and you have these controllers in your hands, and you're able to animate characters using your own body. So it's a version, it's a form of digital puppetry. Now there's a few different I was working with a company that has kind of pivoted since I was working with them. They were a software company, and now they're more of a production company. But they are called Mind Show. They're making some really, really exciting content using virtual reality as, its foundation. But what was really cool for me when I first got into this, I don't know if you guys have ever used virtual reality. This is like an HTC Vive headset, but when you're in there, you look around and you feel as if you're really in that space. The way this software worked is you could jump into a character, and you look down at your hands, and your hands are the character hands. There's a control in your right hand, so you can control the facial features, what's going on. You have a wheel of expressions, and you can find nuance between those expressions. The lip sync is tracked by your own voice, and it's room scale VR, so you can walk around in the space, you can crouch, you can go up and down. There's limitations, but you're really able to do a lot of very cool animation. And it's sort of a combination between motion capture and puppetry at that point, because you're controlling the face with a controller. That's a sort of puppetry. You They actually even had a monitor built in, so it was like a ghost that you could see of yourself while you were recording a performance of yourself. So the way it worked is you record one performance, and then you bring another character into the space, and you can record a different performance. Anyway, virtual reality puppetry is really cool. I was able to create some like high quality cartoon type shows. I was live streaming for a while with Witchy, and I was doing a show called the Jam, and it was a cartoon show every Saturday morning. I would actually do it, I think, once a month. And for the Jam, I would create new cartoons, and I could even go live as one of these characters. I'm sure you guys have seen like Face Rig and Character Animator. So a lot of these performance capture technologies are sort of blending into puppetry techniques, mouth shapes. A lot of the stuff that the Henson Company's been doing in recent years is based around something called HDPS, I think it's Henson Digital Puppetry System. But it's this rig where you can control digital characters using your physical body. And I think that it's a new direction that puppetry is going in. And really, I think, like I said earlier, whatever objects humans have at their disposal, they're going to use to tell stories in some way. A talented storyteller / puppeteer can pick up a pencil and have the pencil, walk across the table, and with bringing another pencil, suddenly you can tell a story and you can get an audience crying. if you pace it right and play the right music. You guys know the power of puppetry. So with these new digital tools, it's really exciting. Now, you don't have to be in VR to see this performance. There are shows like that where you can go see a live show in VR. A friend of mine who's a puppeteer, Genevieve Flati, she's doing a lot of live VR puppetry right now. But the really cool thing is you can record your whole scene as if you have a little diorama with your characters moving around. You've recorded those performances, and then you go in as a virtual camera person. You have a virtual camera, and you can just film it as if you're standing there. You can plan your shots. It's not going to be long before a kid in his bedroom is going to make an awesome feature film using technology like this, because it's possible now. I think technology has really democratized the ability to be able to create, consumable, really good content. Like, for example, I became familiar with TJ, with your show, Spike the Chupacabra. I was just, randomly on Instagram, and I saw you do something, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is a great puppeteer, and his puppet looks awesome, and he's doing something cool. And I'm assuming you're just doing it from your home with a phone or with a computer, and these are tools that a lot of people have at their disposal. So if we go back 30 years ago, it might not have been possible for you to meet this community of people around the country and around the world that are into the same thing as you are. But in 2021, it's really kind of exploding in a very cool way. Even in the past, like 3 or 4 years, I've seen so many new puppets and puppeteer people on these social media platforms. TikTok, it's huge. Instagram, it seems like everywhere you go, there's like 1 or 2 puppets at least doing their thing. So that's pretty exciting.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and have some words from our sponsor, Anchor, and we will get right back to you as soon as possible. Welcome back, and thank you to Anchor for sponsoring this episode. Before the break, we were talking about some VR capabilities and puppetry and just some other ways that our guest has been performing in puppetry. Other than VR, is there anything else that you've kind of experienced or worked in as a puppeteer?
Well, one of the fun things about being a puppeteer is oftentimes you'll find yourself in an environment that was totally unexpected even a week ago. And one of those for me is I started working for a company called Insomniac that does these giant electronic like EDM dance parties, and it's in California and on the West Coast and on the East Coast, all over the place. And part of what they do is they have these over life-size puppets. Like, it's a giant caterpillar that it takes 8 puppeteers to, it's like parade float type stuff. There's a giant octopus with LED lights going. And what you do is you're just going through the crowd with these giant puppets. And another part of that job was, it was one of my first experiences with mascot work, because they have these, these giant mascot puppets. So that was a really weird environment to do puppetry in, because normally, you're on stage doing a live show, or you're underneath a camera and it's pretty quiet. But with this, you're in the middle of a crowd of people who are kind of partying. A lot of them are doing drugs. And oftentimes, I remember one time I was at the front of the caterpillar, we're moving it through the crowd. And what I'm doing actually is I have a giant pole that I'm holding, and it's really heavy above my head. There's, a snake of people behind me. And, our job was to be seen by as many people as possible, to just, so part of what we had to do is push our way through to the front of the crowd and our plan was to go like in front of the stage, So normally if you're at a big concert like that and somebody's trying to get in front of you, that's like a rude thing to do. So as we're going through, like every 10 yards, there's a big guy who's like, what the heck are you doing? He didn't say heck though. And, but then the second he sees what you're doing and that you have this giant puppet above your head, he's like, clear the way. And he's the one to like, to make it a safe experience. So puppetry oftentimes can I've done a lot of puppetry where I've got a puppet and then there's a crowd of people, and people relate to you, of course, differently when you have a puppet. It's like a magical thing. People turn into children sometimes. They're just like, they have this like reverence and respect sometimes for what you're doing. And oftentimes I think that can come from the energy that you bring to it. If you have this puppet, and if you are okay, a good example of this is I work at Universal sometimes, and they have a baby raptor, and of course it's a puppet. Spoiler alert! But I'm playing a character of a dinosaur trainer, dinosaur handler, and I'm walking through this crowd with just this puppet, and oftentimes you don't even have to do much, but just pay attention to what's going on with your work with the puppet, and people are just drawn to it. They want to come in, they want to pet it. They're so interested in this thing that human adults will come to you and be like, is that thing real? Is that a real dinosaur? And yes, it is. It's a real dinosaur, because this is the illusion. This is the story we're telling in that moment. But even with, and this is not, this puppet is an extremely detailed, beautiful thing. It really is more of a creature than a puppet, if you're making that distinction. I know the Jim Henson Company, for a while, they were talking about, okay, what we do with the Muppets, these are different than what we're doing with the creatures. What we have, for example, Hoggle in Labyrinth is a character it's a puppet, but it's very much different from a character like Kermit the Frog or Miss Piggy even. So yeah.
So you're telling me Universal didn't go and get dinosaurs and walk 'em around the park? That's what you're saying?
I can't go on record as saying that, but I'm just gonna leave it just gonna leave it like that.
Well,
Yeah,
thanks for ruining the magic.
yeah, sorry
Wait,
guys. I may have said too much.
They're fake? This whole time I thought they were real.
Oh,
Man.
no, but that's really cool. The Universal, the work that they put into those puppets is astounding. So it's really neat to hear about someone who has gotten to perform with one. I think that's definitely something, like, as an ambition I'm trying to get to, is working at a park like that. But we'll see. And this last year has definitely been a struggle with trying to get jobs like that, just because of how little hiring they're doing and all that. So, but
Yeah.
that's definitely a neat experience and a cool side of the spectrum of puppetry, because you're still a person, but you're also controlling this giant worm or this little baby raptor. So is that more like what a ventriloquist would do? Would you consider that more of that style, or would that be that would just be puppetry to you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think with the baby raptor, it is sort of like ventriloquism, because you're playing two characters at once. You're playing yourself as a dinosaur trainer, and then you've got this baby raptor that is a character. So when you're a ventriloquist, you're doing the same thing. You're the ventriloquist, and then you're also this puppet character. Normally, when I do puppetry, all of my focus is on the puppet character, and me as the puppeteer is not a part of it at all. So the work that I was doing with the baby dinosaur was for me very unique, and also challenging because of that. I realized something that I do as a puppeteer is I emote as the character. So for example, when I'm doing probably Witch, I don't even realize I'm doing it, but when she's smiling, I'm smiling. When she's sad, my face looks sad. And that's part of my just internal process. But when you're doing a ventriloquist type character, or when you really are playing two characters, you have to really cut that off and train yourself. Okay, my dinosaur might be angry right now, but I'm cool as a cucumber, because I'm not that character. I'm a different character. So yeah, it actually is very much like ventriloquism, I think. And that's not something I do, throwing my voice and all that stuff. Ventriloquism is not. It's interesting, and you guys know this, but a lot of non-puppeteers, they'll conflate all the different styles of puppetry and be like, oh, you're a puppeteer, so you work like Pinocchio with strings? Oh, so you do like, ventriloquism? Oh, so you're a shadow guy? Oh, so and rarely is it. There's a lot of people who are puppeteers who have experience in multiple different mediums of puppetry, and I think doing that is a great thing. Getting experience in different types of puppetry can only make you a more rich and better puppeteer. But it's interesting how a lot of people who aren't, into it don't really realize that it's not all the same thing. And there's really masters of marionette puppetry and masters of hand and rod puppetry and tabletop, and rarely do those things all overlap into the same person. So yeah.
Sweet. I have a big question. I was wondering, how did you get into Puppet Up, or how do you got yourself in there in doing that show?
So Puppet Up is a show, for those that don't know, it's a puppet improv show that Henson Alternative produces. And it is it's awesome. So okay, let me rewind a little bit. The question is, how did I get into Puppet Up? So I have a BFA in acting from the Hart School at the University of Hartford. So I was like classically trained to do theater acting, learned a lot of Shakespeare, all that stuff. And I didn't do any comedy until after I graduated from college. I moved to Los Angeles, and I lived right next to a theater. Just randomly, the place I ended up at was at a place right next to the Groundlings Theater, which is a comedy theater and school in Los Angeles, California, that specializes in character-based sketch comedy and improv. And for years, I went through the program there. I took classes. I learned, sketch comedy. I learned improv. Now, an offshoot of this, there's a man named Patrick Bristow. He's the director of Puppet Up, and he also, for a while, and I think he still does, he has a school, and I say I think he still does because of COVID, but there's a school in Los Angeles called the Improvatorium they do improv, but it's kind of styles-based improv. Like, you'll do improv, but in film noir style, and it's more long-form storytelling type stuff. And I really loved Patrick as an improviser and as a teacher, and I really just resonated with him. So I got involved with doing Improvatorium. At the same time, I was doing the Groundlings, kind of side by side. And now I stopped at the Groundlings in, I think, 2011. The Groundlings is a program where they vote, to see if you're going to move on to the next level. And so I finished the school, and voting time came, and I didn't make it into the company, which at the time was, heartbreaking for me. You go through this whole thing, and then you feel like you're not good enough, and there's a lot of that tied up in it. The same week that I didn't make it into the company, Patrick at class, he knew that I had a background in puppetry. He invited me to come and be a part of Puppet Up. Now, I got very lucky at that moment that I was invited to come do that. It's not something that, like, it would be great if they had a puppetry school and people could come and sign up or audition for it, but it unfortunately isn't like that. And they've had workshops since then where people can apply, and they'll teach workshops. In the past few years, they've done a few of those, sort of kind of how Sesame Street does. But those aren't, even being invited to do Puppet Up. I say I was invited to do Puppet Up. What that meant was I was invited to start training, doing workshops. So it was a weekly thing that went on for a few years, where every week I would go, and there would be a group of other people, and we would do an improv class with puppets, and we would do a puppetry class with kind of an improv bend to it. And we're on the Jim Henson Company lot in the screening room most of the time, and we've got the camera set up, and it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And I really, really appreciate the training that I was able to get there, and the relationships I was able to build with these people. And so that's how I got started doing Puppet Up. Now, Puppet Up is one of those shows that unfortunately has been impacted by COVID, because you can't get a whole group of people together to do. It was actually the last live show I did back in January of last year before everything shut down. But it's hopefully going to come back, and it's going to come back really strong. I think it's a killer formula. You have puppets and people improvising on stage. It's really, audiences love it. We were at Knott's Berry Farm last year during the Halloween time, and it was just electric. It was such a fun time. And if you ever get a chance, if you haven't seen it, I know there's some stuff on YouTube, and that can be fun to watch. Something about improv shows is, and I'm sure if you've seen live improv, you know what I'm talking about. It's magical in the moment. Sometimes when you film it, it can lose some of that. So yeah, but anyway, it's really a wonderful show. That's how I became involved in it. I, at the same time, I have to sort of talk about another show that I was doing called Fairy Tale Theater 18 and Over. Now, this was at the same time I was doing Groundlings and taking classes with Patrick at the Improvatorium. There's a friend of mine and an associate of mine, a guy named Michael Feldman. He wrote a show called Fairy Tale Theater 18 and Over. And the idea with this is fairy tales with morals for adults rather than for children. And he was a friend I met at Groundlings. And one night after class, he started to tell me about this show. And I said, Michael, it sounds, because he's a one-man show kind of guy. He at that point, he had done a lot of one-man performances. And I think at this point, he was thinking that he would do this as a one-man show. And I said, it sounds like you could use a puppeteer in the show. You're doing fairy tales. You're going to have these woodland creatures and all this stuff. And so yeah, we started working together. It was a show that he totally wrote. We had a director on board. We premiered it, I think, in I want to say 2009 or 2010, but we've brought this show all over. We went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland with it. We performed it at the Comedy Central stages, Upright Citizens Brigade, the Groundlings here in Los Angeles. And I say this show, it's sort of episodic. So each fairy tale is from 5 to 10 minutes long, and they're very, very, very funny. It's hard to describe how funny these shows are. But we've done over 80 fairy tales over the past 10 years. We just did a musical version. But this is to say, when I arrived for this Puppet Up training at the Jim Henson Company, I didn't have any monitor puppetry experience. So what that means for our listeners who might not know is on camera puppetry. You're looking at a little monitor and your puppet's on that monitor. And I forget if it's called straight scan or reverse scan, but anyway, what it means is the way people work professionally is you're looking at the camera, but left is right and right is left when you're doing your puppet, because that's just the way physics works or whatever. But it can be very tricky at first to train your brain to do that. I know a lot of newer puppeteers are used to using their camera phone, their face, or the front facing camera, and the iPhone and a lot of other phones just automatically flip it when you're recording, which makes the puppetry a lot easier. But it's a whole other skill to do the monitor puppetry. But anyway, when I arrived there, I didn't have to think very, very hard about my improv, because I've been doing a lot of work with that. It's all about practice. It's like riding a bike. And I'm not saying I'm great at it, but I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't worried about my puppetry skills, but what I was worried about was the one thing, okay, how can I make this look good on a monitor? This is the one new element that I'm adding to this. So it wasn't starting from scratch when I arrived. I was already, very much into the comedy world, and I had been doing different live puppetry shows for over 10 years at that point. I started at the Eugene O'Neill a long time before that. So an interesting thing is when I arrived in Los Angeles, like I said, I had just come from university where I studied as an actor, not as a puppeteer. But my very first job I got in Los Angeles was a traveling puppet show. So it dawned on me pretty quickly that, there's a million actors out here, that are trying to make it. There aren't as many puppeteers, and this skill set and this thing, most importantly, this thing that I really enjoy doing is also something that, is sort of a niche, and it might be able to be a career for me somehow. So yeah, that's how I fell into it. Those are sort of the things that led up to me doing, starting to become involved in Puppet Up. Now, when I started Puppet Up in 2011, I didn't do my first show until 2014. So I'm training for 3 years before they feel like, oh, this person is ready to come in and do this thing. So I think I would say patience is really necessary sometimes, in this business. Some people are going to go and they're going to be super successful from the very beginning, and they're going to be a hit, and that's great. Everything they do, they're going to have more and more opportunities all the time. But that's not the case for most people. For most working puppeteers, it's a lot of patience. It's a lot of, you know, worrying about what the next job is going to be, hoping there's going to be another job, you know, seeing if I'm going to make my insurance this year. Honestly, it's a lot of other work sometimes. You know, people supplement it by becoming a teacher or doing other things. A lot of that's part of the reason I love to build, is because I can remain active in puppetry even if I'm not being a puppeteer all the time. I'm still sort of, you know, I'm building a puppet, or I'm being a wrangler on a set. So the more, I think patience and flexibility are very important in this business. But yeah.
Yeah, this industry has definitely done a whole 180 and how it's been, you know, functioning, and things are starting to get back into a good pace. At least in the film industry, and my friends from all around have been getting work and getting back to work. But down there, is puppetry still kind of suffering, or is there kind of opportunity coming back? Because I know that the Henson Company has started to do some more projects with Disney with that alien talk show recently. But other than that, has there really been any rumblings, and have people been getting back to work, or is it kind of still a struggle to find, at least in film and television and live stages, there's still a struggle to get more work, or has it kind of started to pick back up?
It's started to pick back up. I'm based in Los Angeles, and something that happened as a result of the pandemic was a lot of productions moved to Vancouver. So I know there was Fraggle Rock, I think, is filming right now up in Vancouver. There's a production, Nickelodeon production, called The Barbarian and the Troll that just wrapped up in Vancouver. So there are things that are happening. The things that are happening in Los Angeles right now, it seems to still be, I know that things are happening, but they're happening in a much pared down sense. So for example, if there was a production with, you know, with 20 puppeteers on it last year, this year they're like, okay, COVID, we're going to really pare it down. Let's just do it with, you know, 8 people, something like that. So in addition to that, you know, the live stuff hasn't really picked up yet. So Universal, for example, is still closed. Knott's Berry Farm is closed. There's not, you know, there's live shows aren't happening. Improv, you know, if you want to see a show at the Groundlings right now, it's not possible. There are some online things that are happening, which is cool. But in terms of production for film and TV, it is starting back up, but it's being done in a very cautious, slow, and scaled back way, which I think is, you know, with COVID, it's the only, you know, I think that's the responsible thing to do. You have to make big adjustments until we get this thing, you know, until we can boot this thing, whatever that means.
Yeah, it's always good to see that productions are caring about their performers and their actors. And unfortunately, it's taking a while to get back to the normal, but who knows how long normal is going to take to get back to, at least the normal we all remember. So yeah, getting back to anything right now is definitely a blessing for anyone who has based their whole career in any form of entertainment, for sure.
Oh yeah.
So my next question, how did you come up with Little Witchy, or probably Witchy? Was it like a happy accident, or how did she came along?
So she came about, I built the puppet first, and my idea was I wanted to build the smallest possible puppet that I could have in my hand. So I built the foam structure for the head, covered it in this green fleece. And when I put my hand in there, I was like, oh, well, you know, my hand is kind of like bigger than her face, you know. So when you're looking at the puppet Little Witchy, she's got kind of a hunchback. That hunchback is actually the back of my hand. So the reason she's wearing the hood was just like, that was the quickest way I could be like, oh well, just cover my hand up, give her a little hood. And then so I had this puppet that was just sitting there, and I had it for like a couple months, and a friend of mine was like, that's my favorite puppet. I think her face just looks so funny. Then my wife was trying to get she wasn't trying to live stream, but she was trying to get like a video. I think she was trying to live stream, but also do like a guesting session at the same time. And we found a program called YouNow that is like sort of like Twitch, sort of like YouTube, but it's all live streaming. And I was helping her get this set up. you know, so she could do my wife is a YouTuber, and she's a teacher. She does a lot of stuff online. So I was trying to get her this set up with this thing. And while we were doing our test live stream, I was like, I'll just use a puppet. And I had this penguin puppet that I had, and we did it with that. And I was like, ding, oh my gosh, how much fun would it be if I started live streaming with just a puppet? And, you know, because the way this thing works is you're live streaming, and then people can show up in the chat room and they can talk to you, and you're like, then they can come in and guest with you, and you can do sort of like Instagram guesting. It was really like a ding moment for me. And so I started with the penguin for like a day or two. And then I was like, I'm not really inspired by this. And then I picked up the witch puppet that she became Probably Witch. And I was like, I made a new name for my account. It was Probably Penguin. And then I was like, well, now it's Probably Witch, because she's probably a witch. And when I go back and watch some of my first streams, it's like going back, and I mean, I'm not trying to compare myself to The Simpsons, but if you go back and watch early Simpsons, you hear their voices, and it's like, oh, that's sort of like Homer, but it's like very different. And it's like he hasn't quite found it yet. It was like that with Witchy, like the voice was different. So literally streaming for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, I found this character. At first I didn't know who it was, but if you do it enough, as I'm sure you guys will know, because you also have characters that you work with a lot, you really start to know this character. And yeah, that's how Witchy started. After a while, you know, people started to really like it. I started the Instagram. I started doing random music videos for it, and I got some good feedback on that. Again, that speaks to when you get good feedback early on in a project, it can really give you a lot of fuel to continue with that project. So yeah, that's the origin story of Witchy, sort of.
That is awesome. Like, it's kind of fascinating how, like, you just had this random puppet you made, and then you picked it up and do live streams. Like, I stay tuned to your live streams when you announce them. And sometimes I just watch. Sometimes I hop in because I just want to see what's going on. And it's a fantastic character. I love that character. It's one of my favorites, next to Toily Tea Paper and Luckle Ducklebird. She's up there with them, in my opinion.
DJ. I don't know Muckle Duckleberg. I gotta check that out. I know Toily. I actually work with Grant and Puppet Up. He's another Puppet Up performer.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know you had that connection with Toily. That's really neat. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Before we go and end the podcast, I was wondering if you have anything you wanted to share with the audience, any special projects, if you wanted to plug your stream or anything like that. We would love to share any contact or anything like that you want to maintain with anyone interested in watching your content.
Well, thanks, guys. You can find a lot of what I do at Probably Witch on Instagram and on YouTube. I have a TikTok, but I don't really do TikTok very much with that. My website is jessmckaycompany.com. I did some voiceover for a new Netflix series that's going to be coming out in just a few days on March 10th called Dealer. So if you want to hear my voice dubbing a character, that can be done there. But yeah, those are my big projects right now.
That is really awesome to hear. All right, guys, check out Dealer as soon as it comes out. Thank you so much for coming on, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.